Anvil, Hammer, Hatchet podcast.
Welcome to Anvil, Hammer, Hatchet, a show where we try to answer all of life's questions in about an hour and a half. I'm Chris. With me today is my co-host, Army Armstrong.
Hey, how's it going?
It's good to have you back, man. It's definitely nice to have you in the pilot seat again.
I missed last week.
Yeah, well, you know, colonic issues happen, things.
Yeah, thanks for that.
As long as the doctors cleared you, that's cool. And also another fantastic return of Big Daddy Ross, the boss's boss, the man with the plan who knows where to stand. Thanks for being here with us, Ross. We're glad you're feeling better. Nope. Ross is still not here.
Ross has sand in his vagina.
I'm actually getting kind of concerned from what I gather. I kind of made light of it a couple of weeks ago, but from what I understand, the syphilis is actually a lot worse than we thought, and they're talking about amputation. So
he's got black things growing.
At some point,
things are turning black.
We may have a Ken doll as a co-host, from what I hear. So hopefully, fingers crossed that's not the case.
Well, in this day and age, he can take whatever identity feels appropriate for himself.
Gender neutral. That's which is fine. There were a couple of things from the last time we were all together, and last week I did a show with Low Grit. It was a lot of fun. We had a good time, but there were a couple of errors, so I did need to address those. So
don't be CBA.
How did you have? What kind of errors were there? Just because. What? Who screwed up?
It was all me. I at one point. So this is number one. I said that Scott Whelan died last year. We're talking about Stone Temple Pilots, and he did not. He died at the end of 2015,
right?
In December, I believe, early December. We were talking about the movie Straight Outta Compton. Which did you ever see that?
I did.
Okay, yeah. So you know how good that was. But Ice Cube's son played Ice Cube in the movie, and I said his name was O'Shea Jackson. O'Shea Jackson is Ice Cube. He's O'Shea Jackson Jr. So small, is a fairly minor thing, but...
I just wish my name was O'Shea. That would be dope.
We can call you O'Shea if you want. You can be all that you can be,
I just want to be O'Shea.
Well, I towards the end of last week's episode, ended up becoming Suave K. So
I like that.
I'm still on the fence on whether or not I'm going to keep that.
That's like, did you ever read The Onion at all?
Oh, yeah, I'm familiar.
Okay, so back in the day, there used to be they did The Onion. Obviously, it's a satirical newspaper forum, but they had this like editorial with this guy named Smooth B, and it was this black guy, and he would just write about how he was going to do all the finest things for all the finest ladies, and I will lay you down on the beds of the finest silk, and I will peel grapes from the Mongolian forests, and I will feed them to you.
Was this sort of like the Tim Meadows ladies' man character, kind of, but in real life?
But much, much heavier on the satire. Really funny. I don't know why I said that, but anyway.
Oh, no. The Onion actually came up last week, too. It's kind of weird. But, the one other inaccuracy we had from the episode before that, the last time we were all together, we were talking about Planet of the Apes.
Yes.
There were not 7 movies in the original series, the old series from the 70s. There was 5. So at the end of this new run, there will be 9 in total. There's currently 8 Planet of the Apes movies out there. So, again, nothing major, but the deal is we fuck up, we own it.
Yeah,
that's the whole. Sure. That's the whole point.
We facilitate the truth.
Oh yeah, that's the whole point.
Don't be CBA.
Don't be CBA.
Indeed.
So yeah.
Any other fuck ups?
Not that I've caught yet. If I run across them, I will absolutely own it. And if anybody listening notices them, please point them out to us. We're more than happy to admit how stupid we are, or at least
speak for yourself.
Yeah, I was about to say at least I am. At least I am.
Oh, it's good.
But yeah, so we got Chris, we got Army.
Join the army.
And Ross. No Big Daddy Ross.
And we're hanging in my garage, the dirty garage, the Black Widow infested garage. You didn't know that, did you? There's a Black Widow infestation in here.
Awesome. I thought you were going to say there's a Black Widow on your shoulder.
No, but it is kind of nice in here. It's not as cold as it was because it's super nice outside. And, we're surrounded by junk that dampens all the sound, which makes it kind of dope.
We're really, really lucky to have this space. So much like the entree into podcasting, there's going to be two of us today. We have a guest booked for next week.
Oh yeah, we did talk about. I posted, I think, on Facebook that we were going to have Don Roland from the Insiders come in.
Right, we did have to reschedule that for next week, but it is happening. It is happening. It is going to happen. So that should be a lot of fun.
And we're still going to have some other guests come in. I'm trying to wrangle that all up. We're still working with getting certain hardware and stuff so we can be prepared for all this stuff because...
I'm procuring a booking agent as we speak, so we should be just fine.
We do shit on the fly. We just make it happen.
Yeah, speaking of doing things on the fly, we were talking last night and you sort of out of nowhere asked for a recommendation, late night.
There was nothing to watch on TV.
Yeah.
So I'm like, who do I go to? I know Crystal knows something. So immediately you start spitting out stuff of things to watch. And the very first one you picked was one that I ended up watching. The other ones I had all seen already. You had mentioned Santa Clarita Diet,
which I have not seen.
You haven't seen it?
No, but I've heard good things.
It's definitely entertaining.
I like
Drew Barrymore,
Timothy Olyphant a lot.
Yeah.
Did you ever see Justified?
Yes. Well, I saw like season 1.
Right. Okay. That was a really good show. He's great in it. Walton Goggins,
who I love,
is amazing.
That dude's awesome.
Yeah, he was great in as this hillbilly racist preacher. Yeah, he was really good in that. And Timothy Olyphant also, obviously,
and
the historic one, Deadwood.
Walton Goggins was also in the Hateful Eight with
which I still haven't
Tarantino
seen.
Movie. He is the highlight of that movie. Best part of the movie.
I have, and that's saying a lot because he's side by side with Kurt fucking Russell.
Yeah, so. and all the others.
Yeah, the whole cast.
Sam Jackson, not Ali Sheedy. Who's the girl in there?
Again, haven't seen it yet. Which to something that I pointed out a couple of episodes ago. What the fuck am I doing with my life if I'm not watching that? But I will get to it.
I will say it was good. It was definitely entertaining. I do think Walton Goggins was the prime entertainment factor in that whole movie. But as Tarantino movies go, a lot of times there's way more talking. And I understand he's building the story and he's building, all this.
Yeah, he's like Kevin Smith. He's a monologist,
right?
So
right.
the film and the script kind of sit there to support the monologues that he builds up, and Kevin Smith's movies are the same way too,
right? But I mean, it was good. It was definitely a good movie. But I will say, on the flip side of that, Bone Tomahawk and The Hateful Eight came out around
roughly the same time,
and I thought Bone Tomahawk was far and away better than The Hateful Eight.
Well, and didn't The Revenant also come out like sort of in the same window? I know it wasn't the same time, but close. It seemed like there was kind of this theme of desolate wilderness settings that these movies were sort of framed in. It definitely went that way. And in a similar framework, Deadwood, a lot of Deadwood was like that too. And Timothy Olyphant was great in that. But yeah, I haven't seen the Santa Clarita Diet yet, but I have heard really good things. So I didn't realize you had seen it.
It's just entertaining. It wasn't like I'm not going to deconstruct it, but it was definitely entertaining.
Right.
I'm like, I'm going to watch the next episode.
Sure.
This was good.
Yeah.
But the one that you had suggested, the very first one was called Into the Badlands, which we were just talking outside.
It's a fantastic show.
It's kind of like I think I told you I felt it was like The Walking Dead but with ninjas, kind of, or like kung fu in a dystopian.
A concise way to describe it. It is a post-apocalyptic samurai western with motorcycles.
Yeah.
So it was really
and I get a lot of heavy undertones of like what is that thing where steampunk.
Oh, okay.
It had sort of a steampunk element to it, slightly.
Yeah, no, I can
not
see
heavy, but slightly.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see that.
With the dress and the manner of the way things are presented.
Right, in a way, in this dystopian future, they've almost reverted back to a Victorian era, where there's like what would it be? Are they referred to as dukes or whatever? These
barons.
The barons, right? Land barons, and so they run these specific areas, and they're competing land barons, and each one of these barons has their what would be comparable to their military force, and that's these, or at least in this one case, it's these samurai.
Right, and they each run like a certain, like one baron has oil, one baron has like poppies.
Right,
so
each one controls different resources.
Exactly.
So they sort of need each other to continue their existence.
Yet they're at war.
And they're also sort of, because they're vying to control those resources. If you have all the resources, then you don't need to rely on anybody else.
Exactly. So they're all fighting each other to be the biggest and the best.
Yeah, surprisingly good show that flew way under the radar. Had you ever heard of it before?
No, not until last night.
It's on AMC. I watched the first season as it aired, and then it was really hard to find. I recommended it to people, and then wasn't able to point them to any place where they could watch it, and it recently got posted on Netflix.
Yeah.
Because season 2 is airing very soon.
Oh, it is.
So yeah, so it's one of those things now that it's on Netflix, you can binge it and then be right on board for the premiere.
I have to say, like, the very first intro for episode 1 was just a fucking awesome bloodbath. And I'm not like ninja guy. I like martial arts and kung fu and all that shit, but this was badass. You know, I mean, the protagonist in this is fucking badass.
And the fight choreography too is very reminiscent of Hong Kong cinema. It's got a pretty easily relatable way to sort of compare it as sort of a Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon type thing.
I was just going to say that. It has those elements
where the laws of physics don't necessarily apply. But who cares? Because, man, does it look cool.
Yeah, I'm going to flip over this thing and then walk across the tree and stick a knife in your neck and then kick the other guy in the throat at the same time.
Crazy John Woo-ish stuff. Because
definitely John Woo-ish.
Yeah, there's swords. It was really technically choreographed sword fights thing.
Yeah. Heavy duty, really fun.
Yeah. I'm glad you liked it, man. I really enjoyed it when I watched it.
My wife was like, I'm like, what do you think? Is this cool? Because getting her to like be on board with it, she really likes Santa Clarita Diet. She's like, oh, this is good. I could, and Drew Barrymore's cute, but I'm like, what do you think? Is this good? And she's like, this is boring. She's asleep in 5 minutes.
It's definitely a genre piece, and if you're not into that type of movie, then it's not for you.
I just want to be entertained,
right? And to me, it was very entertaining, and it's not just flashbang stuff. It's got an intriguing story.
Definitely.
There's a plot going on. There's a story. Actually, certain points you have to really pay attention. It's kind of becomes complex enough to where you really have to follow it to keep up with what's going on.
There's some weird, mysterious elements in it that I haven't seen yet.
Right, because you've still got probably 2/3 of the season to go. So, yeah,
so we won't spoil anything in case anybody's watching.
Yeah, I don't want to give any spoilers. I just want to give a recommendation.
Yeah.
It was a really good show. What I ended up watching last night was this movie, a documentary that is also available on Netflix called The Wrecking Crew, which is not about a demolition team. There's no construction sites on it. The Wrecking Crew,
the old school musicians from
studio musicians in Los Angeles that were employed throughout the 50s and 60s. And this documentary, which was done by Tommy Tedesco.
That's right.
One of the guitarists, his son made the movie.
Right. And kind of in honor of him, because he was such a big player behind so many giant hits.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And these are sort of the unsung heroes of rock and roll and music in the 60s. They played on
Pet Sounds.
So many classic albums that, they worked with Phil Spector, Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys on Pet Sounds.
Yeah. And Glenn Campbell was part of the
Glenn Campbell got his start there.
Yeah.
And when he made his first solo record and was actually singing on it, they were kind of like, oh, okay, he's going to get too big for his britches and not have time for us anymore. And when he recorded his first record, guess who he turned to be on the album?
Exactly.
I mean, where else would you go?
Right.
You've got
the best of the best.
The best of the best in your back pocket. They're your buddies, your coworkers. Of course, you're going to go to them.
Yeah.
But I guess Cher was.
Yeah.
Sonny and Cher worked with them a lot.
Yeah.
They were the Mamas and the Papas were basically a 4-piece vocal group, so they needed a band, and the Wrecking Crew was essentially...
They recorded it all.
Yeah, that was their band.
Yeah.
They weren't even sort of subbing in for people. The way, a lot of times, the way it would work is the Wrecking Crew would not only record the parts, but a lot of the improvisation and creativity, they would write those pieces. They would get a basic structure of what the song was going to be, and they would add their flair, talent, and technique to it. So it was really they were the writers as well.
And they were all basically just a bunch of geeky musicians who happened to coalesce at the same time in period and just happened to be in LA during those times. And
when rock and roll was coming out.
Rock and roll was really,
all the sort of stuffier studio musicians that were generally employed couldn't be bothered with rock and roll. They had no interest in doing that. And so these younger guys were like, hey man, paycheck's a paycheck, I'll do it.
Right.
And so not only did they learn how to play rock and roll, but in a big way, they created the style that rock and roll became.
Definitely.
Because it was their thumbprint that was all over everything.
And everybody has heard it. Everybody's heard these guys play. Nobody knows.
If you've heard Good Vibrations, you've heard the Wrecking Crew because they played all the music on it.
Right.
Which
is so weird because for years and years and years, I had always thought like, wow, I mean, I know the Beach Boys could play that shit.
They had to learn.
But they had to learn
they had to learn the songs that the Wrecking Crew wrote so that they could go on tour.
The Monkies too.
Yeah, the Wrecking Crew recorded all the Monkies parts. I guess when Peter Tork first arrived on the first day of recording, they just told him to sort of go sit in the green room.
Exactly.
He showed up with his axe.
He's like, I thought I was going to play.
They were like, no, the parts are done. We just need Mickey for vocals. That's
right.
He didn't even have to go down there.
Speaking of Mickey, interesting story.
I'll be the judge of that.
A long time ago in Austin, Mickey Dolenz from the Monkees and he was the drummer / sometimes singer,
right? And him and Davy Jones shared vocal duties, I guess.
Yeah. Anyway, my ex-girlfriend was walking down the street with Mickey Dolenz. I don't know why. Maybe she was star fucking or something, but I ran up to her just because I wanted to meet Mickey Dolenz. I didn't give a shit about the Monkees. Not really. I mean, we all like, there's some songs we like, but
I mean, I know my first exposure to them was the television show that they had.
Right.
What was it in the 80s? Hey, Hey, We're the Monkees or whatever.
No, that was 60s.
Oh, no, but I was exposed to it. I think they started airing it on MTV.
Or Nickelodeon. They did it too, I think.
Oh, okay.
Hey, We're the Monkees.
My memories of it on MTV, they started running
maybe
in the 80s and it had a little resurgence there.
Yeah, because I wasn't watching it in the 60s.
Oh, yeah, no, neither was I.
Because we did not exist.
Right. We weren't even a thought at that point. But I do. There's like Last Train to Clarksville is a good song.
I'm Not Your Stepping Stone.
Stepping Stone is a great song.
I love that song.
That's, that they actually have to be a band that was sort of a constructed thing for a television show. I mean, bands have been assembled forever, and put together, but generally it was for the purposes of music. And as far as I know, they were one of the first bands or if not one of the only
bands. They were
the
first in sync or Backstreet Boys.
But even those bands were at least assembled to make music and go on tour and make records. Those guys were literally assembled for a television show.
Right.
The music was a byproduct.
Did you watch? Did you like that show? I watched
definitely. I mean,
I liked not what's his name? Michael Nesmith was the one I always liked.
I thought they were all pretty funny.
Frank Zappa came on that show.
Oh, really? I did not know that. I did not realize that.
He and Michael Nesmith switched. They did a role reversal on the show. Like Zappa played Michael Nesmith and Michael Nesmith played Frank Zappa.
Wow, that's strange.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I don't remember. Again, it was a long, long time ago. Then it's been years since I've seen that show. But when they needed music for this show, because they were a la Partridge Family and other shows that had done it. They were planning on marketing the music alongside as a sort of companion piece to the show, and those songs got radio play as well, which was strange for a TV show. But, when they needed the music to go with those songs, they went and hit up the Wrecking Crew. So those are the people that are on those Monkey songs as well.
Right. I also heard, I don't know if this is true or not, but I also heard that Neil Diamond had a lot to do with writing a lot of those Monkey songs.
Oh, yeah. I've never heard that. That's interesting,
too. We should check that out.
As far as the lyrics and stuff?
Yeah, like songs. Like he wrote some of those songs is what I heard. I don't know if that's true or not. I also heard that Mike D was Michael Diamond from Beastie Boys, was Neil Diamond's son, which I do not think is true. That would be dope if it was.
I'm almost 100% positive that that's not true.
I'm Mike D, the one who put the satin in your panties.
Although I did hear Mike D died driving a car naked into a tree.
Okay.
So
let's just start the corrections.
But I guess what happened with the Wrecking Crew was, that was sort of par for the course. That's the way things were done back then. And it's something that Low Grit and I talked about last week. We got into a conversation about ghostwriters or, songwriters that sold their music to artists to perform, which, there was the Tin Pan Alley area in New York where the, songwriters went to work every day and cranked it out.
Yep.
Their 9 to 5s. Hiring studio musicians to play on records was pretty much standard. And the way that impacted the Wrecking Crew was the kids who grew up learning or listening to those records they had no idea that was happening. They assumed the bands that they were seeing and listening to were performing on all that stuff.
Yeah.
So that's how they went about becoming musicians. They didn't start writing down songs writing out sheet music.
So in essence, they learned from the Wrecking Crew.
Right. Yeah. But as far as the format goes, they learned to play their instruments and not rely on other people for writing. And so you had bands like Led Zeppelin who didn't need the Wrecking Crew.
No charts.
Or like the Rolling Stones that didn't need the Wrecking Crew. So as that generation of rock and rollers came up and sort of came out full flushed out bands from the start, the necessity for the session musicians sort of went by the wayside. Yeah. They were, writing their own vocals, or writing their own lyrics rather. So the need for those songwriters writing vocals also went by the wayside. And after, 40, 50 years of that, the necessity for, or rather people utilizing those tools now is very looked down upon. Artists like Katy Perry or somebody.
You don't record your own music?
Right. Oh, you didn't write that song? Right. And it's sort of like...
And it's funny because in rock and roll, dismissed. I think that's kind of the thing, but in country music... Everybody there's ghostwriters in country music all fucking day long.
And it was like that a lot longer than it wasn't. That's my
right.
That's
my
point.
Willie Nelson was a ghostwriter.
The fact that we're in this little window now where it's not common practice for a lot of artists, it's sort of looked down upon. But there's a thing that occurred to me. If you're dismissing somebody who wrote lyrics for somebody else, do we now have to dismiss Black Sabbath? Because Ozzy Osbourne didn't write the songs, Geezer Butler did.
Right.
So just because he's standing behind him, does that mean that Black Sabbath has no validity?
Right. Where do you draw the line?
I'm going to go out on a limb and say, no, it does not mean that Black Sabbath is, if anything, they're one of the most valid bands on the planet in history. And it is break time. So
we'll be back.
We're going to take a little pause
for the cause.
We'll be right back, guys. Hang tight. And we're back from break. Man.
It's good to be back. We did a couple shots.
I have so much fun on our breaks, dude. That I don't know if what I enjoy more, if I enjoy when we're recording or when we're not.
Well, the funny thing is, it's kind of the same. You know what I mean? I think that's what propagated this whole thing, is because you and I at work would go out on smoke breaks and we would talk and like everything.
We do not advocate smoking. Smoking's bad for you. Do not smoke, kids.
Indeed. But the conversations we have were podcast worthy. Not that this is, but I'm saying.
But no, they were definitely precursors to a podcast, and there was many a time when we would just say, why aren't we recording this? And so eventually we just started doing that.
And now whenever we go out and are on break or between podcast breaks or work breaks or whatever, we start talking, and then we're like, don't say anything, save it for the podcast, because you know what I mean?
It's definitely caused a lot of editing in our free time throughout the week. But
but don't talk.
No, right, exactly. Don't waste it.
Yeah.
But I think I mentioned to you last week that we just sort of need to get drones to and just tether them to like our phones or our tablets.
Follow us around.
Just follow us around with a live mic and record our conversations.
Right.
Because there was a couple of times last week where I was like, I wish we had recorded that. That was actually, it was worthy of the podcast. So
I know. But and I'm usually funnier when I'm not on mic.
Oh, I disagree. You're never funny. You're never.
Thanks.
No, I'm absolutely kidding.
You're
a buddy. Absolutely kidding.
You're a buddy.
No, but most of the conversations we have are sort of music centric or movie centric or television. I mean, that's just sort of that. Those are our interests. So, for people listening, basically, if you're listening to this, it's the equivalent of hanging out with us.
That's exactly what it is.
It would be the exact same thing.
Yeah.
I like just the sort of transparent nature of what we're doing right now. We don't do a whole lot of prep or discussion. We don't
We don't do any prep or discussion.
Yeah, we don't figure out talking points or anything like that.
We pretty much just go.
The most real prep that I do is making a list of my mistakes.
Right.
Because like I've said before, there are so many of them that I have to jot them down because I'll forget. But
there's
otherwise.
Really not that many of them.
There's enough, and I'm sure there are more, and I'm sure there have been some this episode as well. So if you want to let me know what those were, you can send me an email at AnvilHammerHatchet@gmail.com and tell me how I fucked up, and I'll go through and fix it.
And speaking of, you just set up a YouTube channel now. So all our episodes and some songs are on YouTube.
We do have, exactly. That is one of the new platforms that we're streaming the show on. It's AnvilHammerHatchet on YouTube. All the episodes that we've done so far are up, as well as Shark.
And if you want to be on the show, there's a possibility we could have you on.
Absolutely right. But if you subscribe to the YouTube channel, you will get notifications when new episodes go up. You'll just get a quick email saying, hey, the new app's up. The easiest way to find that, if you don't want to just search YouTube, is go to AnvilHammerHatchet.com. All of our social media links are across the top, and there is a link to the YouTube page up there as well. There's a link to our Facebook, our Instagram, our Twitter. There's the YouTube link. There's actually a link to our phone number.
So if Pornhub. We're on Pornhub.
Coming soon. I have to set up that account first, but I believe you need to be a pro member to post videos. So, as soon as Ross gives us the videos that he's been compiling and we set up that pro member account, we'll get those up as soon as possible. And he needs to get those recorded really quick before that surgery takes place.
Indeed.
That's going to knock him out of the game pretty fast.
Well, that'll put him in a different category.
He'll be a subgenre, right? Yeah. But no, there's actually a link to our phone number. So if you go to the site and click that link from your smartphone,
voicemail.
If you click the link, it'll immediately bring it up, and you can dial straight to it from your phone.
Yeah.
Leave us a voicemail.
I call it all the time.
That I do too. I usually just leave heavy breathing.
Yeah.
Which is weird because I'm the one who listens to the voicemail, so I'm kind of just doing it for me.
It's just like
But yeah, no. So you can leave us a voicemail with any topic ideas. Things you might want us to discuss or cover, any, like I said, mistakes that we are assuredly going to make.
Topic ideas are a great idea because
definitely
we do have a tendency.
I have one.
Okay.
From friend of the show / listener.
Okay.
Our buddy Andrew, who I've mentioned on the show. We've all given big shout outs to Andrew.
Wu-Tang.
That he is the sort of the ODB of our listeners.
Yes.
Andrew had a question about Keith Moon. He just wanted to get our take on the sort of the antics of Keith Moon.
Is he a Who fan?
He's just Andrew's a music fan.
Oh, right on.
I as opposed to a lot of listeners, I actually have a lot of interaction with Andrew. So I know a little bit more about him than other people that listen. And he's very similar to us in that he's just a music guy.
Right.
He's into metal and hip hop and a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And he just sort of wanted to get our take on Keith Moon. I think a few episodes ago we were talking about mods and mod culture, and you can't really glance over that topic without the Who coming up.
Sure.
And as an aside, I think I mentioned Keith Moon driving Rolls Royce or Bentley into a Holiday Inn pool.
My memory of Keith Moon is, and I know, I think you and I were talking about, Keith Moon, they based Animal from the Muppets off of Keith Moon's character.
I still stand by that the hair looks more like John Bonham.
Right.
Till the end of the day, right.
It may have been John Bonham for all I know, and that may be a correction. But my memory is when
let us know, AnvilHammerHatchet@gmail.com.
Yes. When they were on, I can't remember what.
The Smothers Brothers.
It was the Smothers Brothers.
It's got to be the incident.
It was the Smothers Brothers.
With the kaboom.
When the drum set exploded and they were all completely taken aback, hey, we're going to do this thing. At the end of the show, the fucking drum kit's going to explode. And they were all just holy shit.
Keith Moon bribed one of the stagehands to stuff his bass drum with, it was either gunpowder or dynamite, because oddly enough, he was a big fan. And how do you even get it? He was a big fan of dynamite. How do you get dynamite?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of dynamite. I like it. I keep it around the house. It's all right.
if you're going to blow something up, dynamite seems like a good go-to. You know, where do you procure dynamite as a rock drummer? But yeah, supposedly that was sort of the story that I know is that he started with cherry bombs and then graduated to M80s and then eventually started using dynamite sticks.
Yes.
I'm assuming half sticks or whatever. But so he bribed one of the stagehands at the Smothers Brothers to pack his bass drum. The guy way overdid it because clearly he's not a pyrotechnic engineer. He's not a
demolitions expert.
Right. So, and I guess at the end of the song, when he hit the final kick drum, it was supposed to, make a little bang. And it exploded.
Blew the drum kit apart.
It blew the drum kit. It singed Pete Townshend's hair.
Yeah.
And from what I heard, Pete Townsend actually had some hearing issues in his right ear for a long time after that. Yeah. It sent, this is something I didn't know, it sent a sliver of a cymbal into Keith. It like impaled Keith Moon in the arm. Like a chunk of the cymbal just shurikened him right in the arm.
Really?
Yeah. So it went bad.
Do you know what song it was?
I don't recall, but
I want to say it was My Generation, but I could be wrong.
It probably was. That was sort of their big breakout hit, I believe.
And that was right around the time,
because that was post Can't Explain, and so it was. The Smothers Brothers was, I believe, late 60s, early 70s. So it would have been one of their later singles. But so, Keith Moon had they called him Moon the Loon. That was his nickname.
Right.
Because he was a nut. I believe if Keith Moon was alive today or had grown up today, he would have been not Moon the Loon. He would have been Keith the Autistic. Because he had a really bizarre, to me, what seemed like a personality disorder.
Sure.
That, at the time, people just went, oh, he's kind of a nut. But
his drumming style was
manic.
Manic and frenetic and just like bongo,
He was accused by a lot of producers as not being able to keep time because his time would increase and slow down and increase. And they later, or I believe it was John Entwistle, who was the bass player for The Who, for those who don't know, said, no, his timing was perfect. It just changed a lot, which, okay. I'll accept that.
Well, if John Entwistle said that the timing was perfect, and it's fucking John Entwistle,
yeah, as the bass player, that's kind of his call to make. For
sure.
So
and John Entwistle died in a pile of cocaine with hookers
in a way that Glenn Frey only wished he had died. Yeah. He died in the most. I believe it was in a Vegas hotel with an alleged. We weren't there. We can't speak to it. So to the Entwistle estate. We're only saying what we've heard, but from what I've heard, there was a mountain of blow and at least one prostitute in the room.
Yeah.
So rock and roll, fucking Entwistle. If you're going to be a rock star, how else are you supposed to go out?
And that dude, man, bass playing wise, like I rank him up there with fucking Geezer Butler.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
With fucking Les Claypool, with fucking Pistorius.
He definitely was not one of those players that thought more was less. You know what I mean? Because more was more.
Right.
The guy, so many notes all over the neck, just as
he filled the songs.
Fills in places you did not. They were completely unnecessary, and it was awesome.
Have you ever listen to A Quick One by The Who? That's my favorite Who album.
Yeah, I have their discography. Actually, mine is probably the most generic choice, which is Who's Next.
Yeah, that was great stuff.
That was what is the guy's name? Glenn Johns? Is that the producer?
I don't know.
He was the guy who the producer on that album was the guy who, for whatever reason, was sort of able to wrangle in their sound and wrangle in Moon the Loon to a big degree and get really structured, well fleshed out songs that were, I would think, the majority of their hits catalog is off that album. I mean, it's got Behind Blue Eyes and Who Are You and all the themes from all the CSIs,
right?
But it's got a ton of great songs on it, and it's such a clean, well produced album. Keith Moon, when he wasn't in the studio and when he wasn't on tour, was erratic and bored. He drank more when he was at home. He did more drugs when he was at home. He was one of those people that needed to be touring or recording constantly, or he got anxious and edgy and he got in trouble.
Well, he probably had coping mechanisms just like lots of us do,
Well, and
we deal with it in a certain way. But I think John Bonham was actually the same way. Maybe not as frenetic and out there as Keith Moon, but Bonham definitely rode that same fucking roller coaster. You know, I mean, he wasn't jumping off houses. Well, maybe he was. I don't know, but and into pools and shit.
But he you could see a lot of his energy was spent on the drums. He hit the drums like a gorilla
animal.
You know, I mean, he really beat the shit out of the skins. And that's one weird thing about Keith Moon's style is if you watch him play, okay, most drummers play with their arms moving up and down. You know, they raise the stick and lower the stick. Keith Moon played front to back. He shot his arms forward and backwards to tap the string. His drums were set up pretty far away from him. He had toms on the left and right side of his kit.
I didn't know that.
Because he didn't play around the kit. He played across the kit. So a lot of times, I mean, I think it was Entwistle who described his playing was like watching somebody skiing, you know, with their arms going front to back, front to back. He had a very, very unique style. He played mostly fills, you know,
heavy fills. Yeah, heavy with the fills.
If you really listen to it, it's almost all fills,
yeah.
Which is weird. But that speaks to what Entwistle was talking about his timing, because most fills are just little nuances, little accents, little flutters. He was keeping time with those fills.
Yeah, and if you can keep time doing fills, which is like I play drums a little bit, but like whenever you start playing fills, like you have to, when you're counting, you're not literally counting, you're feeling the one. You know what I mean? Like 1, 2, 3,
to
4,
me,
1, 2, 3.
For guitar players out there, to me, a comparison would be it's the difference between playing power chords and arpeggios.
Right.
You know, both are keeping time, but one require the nuances to it are a lot more complex.
Right. And I really think it's feel. Like some people are all about the counting and like, you know,
the metronome
of it, but like
click tracks.
To me, it is all feel. Like, you know, when you're there.
I believe Glenn Johns, if I was right about that, I believe that was one of the techniques he used to sort of rein Moon in a little bit. Was he made him play to a click track.
Really?
Yeah, which for somebody as frenetic as that guy was probably a challenge. And like I said, he was such an ADD off the rails dude that challenge probably was really beneficial to him.
Sure.
Yeah, so his style was weird, and one of the things that I never noticed until really recently, and this for a drummer is really bizarre, didn't use a hi-hat. No hi-hat in his kit.
Really?
Crashes and rides.
Really?
Those were the cymbals he used. He did not have a hi-hat.
Well, I know that he was heavy on the crashes and rides.
Well, kind of had to be because there was no hi-hat.
Right.
Isn't that weird?
That is weird. I didn't know that.
Okay, this is really inside baseball for people listening. If you're not in a band or a musician or you're not a drummer or whatever, the absence of a hi-hat might seem like a really minor detail, but it's really not.
It's a timekeeper.
It's as standard of a piece of the kit as a bass drum or a snare drum. Yeah. And if you've heard drums, 99.9% of the songs you've ever heard had at least those three pieces to this kit.
Typically,
he played double bass with no hi-hat.
Right. Typically, the
fucking weirdo.
As drummers will keep time on the hi-hat with their left foot as the time.
Yeah, those will be your 8th notes or your 16th notes that the rest of the quarter notes sort of sit within in the bar. So yeah, real bizarre, unique drummer as an artist, as a person, really troubled. I know he had levels of OCD. There was a habit he got into. It started with cherry bombs, that he would flush a cherry bomb down the toilet in his hotel room and blow it up. And then he used an M80 and blew it up. And then he used supposedly at one point he was playing music on a radio really loud or relatively loud. And the concierge from the hotel called him and asked him to turn the music down. And he called the front desk and asked him if he could send the concierge up. And he invited him into his room, excused himself to the restroom for a few seconds, came back out of the restroom and went, give it a second. Boom. Giant explosion. He opened the whole hotel room bathroom door to the exploded toilet and said, "No, that's loud. That's noise. And then he clicked the radio on and went, "This is ooh."
See,
yeah,
I wish I could do something that fucking cool. I will never be that cool ever.
All right. As far as anti-cool goes, this was disillusioning, but you got to get it out there because Snopes is a thing. Legendarily, on his 21st birthday at a Holiday Inn, I don't know what city it was in. At a Holiday Inn, Keith Moon had a 21st birthday party that got completely out of control and ended up with cops being there and guns drawn. And at some point, he drove either a Rolls Royce or a Bentley into the hotel swimming pool, causing thousands of dollars of damage. And it turns out he did tell that story in a magazine interview. I don't know if it was Rolling Stone or who was interviewing. He, described the story, told it well, became legend, and it was completely made up.
It was not true?
It was completely made up.
Get the fuck out of here.
Supposedly.
Really?
From what I gathered, that never actually happened.
Really?
He was sort of building the legend of Keith Moon.
Yeah.
But one thing that is kind of legendary that was an aside to the same story is apparently on his 21st birthday party, he was 20. And
he was 20 on his 21st birthday?
Well, he was having his 20th birthday. They were playing in the States, and they had this hotel room booked. And wherever it was, the legal drinking age even back then wasn't 18; it was 21.
Right.
Which in most states back then it was 18. At a certain point, was in the mid 70s or something. They made a federal drinking age of 21, and it's technically not the federal drinking age. A state, I believe, they could make it 18, but if your drinking age is 18, the federal government will not fund your roads and freeway construction. So it basically, you can do whatever you want, but there's going to be a big financial penalty. So it's kind of
interesting.
All right, is it wrong? Am I framing this incorrect? Isn't that sort of like blackmail? Like, oh yeah, you do whatever you want.
We're not paying for it.
It's a free country. It's going to cost you, but be my guest. Go ahead. That to me, that feels kind of like strong arming.
Sure. Well, that's nothing new.
So we have an unofficial federal drinking age of 21, but back then it was state to state. I know when I was growing up as a kid, when I was literally in elementary school, for people who were older than me, the drinking age was 18.
Exactly. I remember that.
And they had, I remember a lot of my parents' friends being really bummed because, they're 19 and they can go to a bar and drink, and then
suddenly they can't.
Starting tomorrow, they have to wait 2 years or whatever. Yeah. So,
Well, the funny thing is like, I mean, I've been drinking since I was in, I don't know,
diapers?
Sixth grade or something. Sixth grade, I think, is when I started 6th or 5th grade.
Sounds about right.
Anyway, like that doesn't stop anybody.
No, sleepovers at friends. Eventually, the parents are going to go to bed, and then your buddy goes,
"Hey,
my dad has a liquor cabinet." Yes,
That's exactly what happened. My buddy Tommy came over with a bottle of Wild Turkey.
It was my buddy Billy.
Okay, buddy Billy and Tommy, they're all right.
So that's. I mean, I don't think at that point definitely it was a very rare occasion.
Oh sure,
but
well, I do remember my buddy coming over and bringing over he brought over a flask. It was a ceramic jug of Wild Turkey, like it was a promotional sort of thing, and it looked like a turkey, but it was like
okay,
you know what I mean?
I was picturing the sort of the moonshine, like the old moonshine jug,
right? No, it
was sort of what you would see with the jug band,
right. Yeah. No, it wasn't like that. Didn't have the X's on the front of it,
cork in the top of it.
But he brought that over, and
the chick from the granny from Beverly Hillbillies wheeling her around.
Exactly. So we were drinking. It was 101 Wild Turkey 101 out of this thing, and eating Cheetos,
which is pretty rough and rugged for a 12-year-old.
Yeah, 6th grade. Come on. So the funny thing is like my parents bought 2 houses on this plot of land, and they lived in one house, and they let me live in the other house. So the other house didn't have running water or anything, but I lived there.
It had running turkey. Who cares?
It had running turkey. So he would come over and crash, and we
did your thing. Yes.
Oh my God! And then my mom would give him a ride home the next day.
Oh God, the debauchery of a 12-year-old living on his own.
And the car, our 1980 Ford Fairlane.
I'm sure Tom Hanks in Big had nothing on you two.
Yeah, it was interesting, but yeah, we definitely rode that alcohol highway in high school or in junior high,
and I mean,
or whatever fucking grade.
Obviously,
grade.
As we all sort of know without saying out loud, drinking ages help keep things in somewhat control, but they don't prevent everything. And back then, like I said, in the 70s, they changed the drinking age, but apparently where the Who was staying on the day of Keith Moon's birthday, the drinking age was above 20. So it must have been 21. So supposedly he made this big publicity stunt about how Keith Moon's 21st birthday would be at this hotel. There were radio spots. There was a banner out front. So
how at this point, how deep is he in the Who? Like, is this early Who?
No, this is like 2 or 3 years into it. He'd been with them for a while.
Okay.
They were touring America. They were, this was in. So he made this big fanfare, this is a very detailed, well-constructed plot just to ensure that on your 20th birthday, the hotel bartender is not going to card you and refuse you service. He did all that just to make sure he could get served.
That's awesome.
I mean, that's dedication.
Yeah.
There's dedication to alcoholism. That is Charles Bukowski level dedication to alcoholism. They recorded radio promos to help further his alcoholic state. So, and that was the same party where supposedly the Bentley went in the pool, which never happened. So that, to me, that aside is almost as cool as the imaginary legend.
Hey, stories are stories.
Keith Moon was a nut. He was definitely a nut. He sadly died. This is ironic. To me, this is sort of bizarre. He died of an overdose of medication, so a drug overdose of a medication meant to help curb the withdrawals from alcoholism. He was trying to quit drinking to get healthy.
So it was almost like a methadone overdose.
Right, but his alcoholism was so severe that the level of medication he would need to sort of tamp down those withdrawal symptoms was enough to be fatal.
How old was he when he died?
I don't know off the top of my head. I want to say he was something like 27 or 28. Yeah,
he couldn't have been into his 30s.
It was something a sadly young age, for somebody who was that promising and bright and brilliant. But at the same time, I do kind of feel like, based on his behavior and like what we know of his career, a very tormented and tortured person.
Sure.
Like I said, he was only happy and alive when he was touring or in the studio. If you are that saddened when you're just sort of by yourself and in your head, there's issues there. And I think that happens with a lot of geniuses. I think that happened with Jim. I think it happened with Jim Morrison.
I think it happens with everyday people. Like everyday people have to deal with stuff, and you don't know how to deal with it. You don't know how to cope with it, and you have to deal with it. You have to cope with it.
But there are so many more coping mechanisms now than there were. I mean,
absolutely.
Like I said,
back then there was.
If he was alive now, I would speculate he would have had a diagnosable psychological condition that could have potentially been treatable, whereas back then those evaluations and assessments hadn't been done. You were just written off as a nut.
Yep.
And so or as party guy, and a lot of those party guys who everybody's like, dude, that guy's having so much fun. I wish I was him. No, you don't. That guy's fucking miserable.
Right.
And all of his acting out is he's really just trying to mask or divorce himself from that like internal turmoil and struggle that he lives with every day.
Yeah.
I think I was about to say Jim Morrison, I believe, was a very tortured soul. I think he was very intellectual, very intelligent, almost to a fault.
Well, the weird thing is like Jim Morrison, he was 27 when he died.
One of the 27
magic
club.
27 number, And I remember looking back at myself when I was 27 and thinking I was nowhere near anywhere Jim Morrison or Jimmy Page or Janis Joplin or Kurt Cobain,
Jimi Hendrix,
or anybody, you know what I mean, on that level. At 27 years old, I was a dipshit. I'm still a dipshit. But Jesus,
the live fast, die young, and leave a beautiful corpse. That's kind of a bumper sticker cliche. But the classic thing is the candle that burns twice as bright burns half as long.
Yeah.
So the question is, do you want to live life full throttle for half the time and have that list of accomplishments in twice the accomplishments in half a lifetime? Or do you want,
these guys don't see the future. They're just reacting to their surroundings and dealing with whatever's being thrown at them. They happen to be in a certain place at a certain time where they were thrown into the spotlight, and they happen
the lion's den, really.
The lion's den, and they happen to be making fantastic records and historic records. There will never be another time in the history of the world or any world where rock and roll had its thing. You know what I mean? We are lucky to be in this particular time.
Man, I know exactly what you're saying, and I hope you're wrong. Just because the pendulum swing of the way culture works, it definitely feels like...
Well, I'm looking at it from a very limited point of view.
No, I know what I was going to say is, like, right now, it definitely looks like we aren't going to see that we haven't seen it for a long time. Logan and I, last week, we actually had a discussion about what happened to dangerous music. And is that just over, or is it...
What is considered dangerous music nowadays?
To me, nowadays?
Yeah.
That was sort of the point of the conversation, or that particular topic, is that to us, we didn't see any.
Right.
But I brought up underground bands that aren't necessarily challenging social structures, but they are challenging contemporary musical norms. Basically, they're not pandering to trends or radio. And one of the bands I brought up as an example of that was High on Fire.
Yeah.
Bands that basically they're not trying to fit in any particular mold. To me, they're challenging musical norms.
There will always be an antithesis to whatever is popular, which I've always gravitated towards. You know what I mean? Like, if something's popular...
And I am re-agreeing with that statement now, because there was definitely a while there where I thought that was not the case. After the early millennium sort of alternative movement got co-opted into the mainstream so precisely and concisely and fastidiously, where, your Marilyn Manson's, Korn's, Limp Bizkit's, those Linkin Parks got really, that rebel music that was coming out in the early 2000s. And I do still consider Marilyn Manson to be rebel music, just like the Sex Pistols or Nirvana or the Doors or the Rolling Stones. Marilyn Manson was a big middle finger in the air to the establishment. And he's, of all those people, the one band that sort of still stands the test of time and is still recording current music that is still really good. A track I referenced last week was, have you heard Deep Six?
No.
It's a newer, I believe it came out about a year and a half ago. Newer Marilyn Manson track. It's really good.
Honestly, the whole Marilyn Manson thing, I think that was past my time. You know what I mean? Like, and I need to be open-minded and be like,
there really is. There's no such thing as past your time.
I know that.
You never want to be the dude in 1985.
Sometimes it's silly.
Who's sitting in your IROC Z with your mullet, listening to Bon Jovi, but you've been doing that for the last 30 years.
Right.
And it's 2017 and you've still got the IRX and you've still got the mullet and whoa, we're halfway there. No,
nothing against Marilyn Manson.
Keep listening.
I'm just saying, like...
but the cool thing about music is you can constantly go back and explore it. I did not get into Robert Johnson in the 20s and 30s. I found my way back to it way after the fact.
Right.
I got...
Do you like Robert Johnson?
I love so I'm listening to alternative music, the Pixies, Sonic Youth, Jane's Addiction,
Fugazi.
and they're but not relevant to the point. I'm listening to all these sort of like alternative bands that are sort of trying to be sonically different and unique, and they're quoting their influences as Velvet Underground.
Right.
So I go back and I start exploring Velvet Underground, and I find Lou Reed and John Cale and these guys, and find out. Oh, by the way, Lou Reed, ghostwriter. He used to be a singer-songwriter who would sell songs to other people, which apparently today would make him not cool and not an artist. So if you say Lou Reed's not an artist, go fuck yourself. So by that comparison, Katy Perry's just as valid. So everybody who has a problem with people singing other people's songs,
I don't have a problem with
that. So I would trace, and then it turned out that the VU and the Stooges and the MC5, that's where that sort of dovetailed out to me, were into old blues guys. So I started listening to the old Delta blues, your Howlin' Wolves, your John Lee Hookers, your Mississippi John Hurts, these guys. And it turned out that the place that took me back to was Robert Johnson. So am I a Robert Johnson fan? Hell yeah. Originally? No.
Well, yeah, of course.
But music is a journey.
Let me ask you this.
It's a journey.
It is indeed. And I respect the fact where you're going with that, because indeed
I'm
you
saying
do
you
need
can
to
still
explore the alleyways.
You can still go backwards.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I still am going backwards.
Yeah, so I mean I would actually, I mean, as a old metal hesher like I am, or an old punk rock hesher like me, and an old metal hesher like you, go check the shit that the kids were listening to in '99. Marilyn Manson and the Spooky Kids were a really good band, and they had.
See, I kind of put Marilyn Manson and Limp Bizkit in the same bucket together. And although I don't dislike Marilyn Manson, like they've got some decent tunes or whatever, but the music content, music style, maybe not my favorite thing. Like I sort of crave I have a different craving for music. You know what I mean?
But like you said, you haven't really explored it that much.
I haven't, because I think
maybe well, absolutely not. It's because it came out in a time when you were in a different place. That being said, I can definitely tell you that musically, sonically, it has a lot involved with it that actually appeals to what I know of your taste. Like, it's very aggressive. It's very technically proficient. The thing that Logan and I were talking about was how Marilyn Manson couldn't rely on shock value anymore. Initially that was the big reason that he became the end all be all of we were talking about the PMRC. The second wave. The second wave. And how he became the target. He had a bullseye on his head because of the post-Columbine fallout. Yes. And so a lot of the music really got overlooked in the whole process. It was more about the image and the styling or whatever. Right. The quote unquote shock value. And it's been 20 years, and the shock's not there anymore. Right. So he's really got to rely on his chops, his musical talent, his writing ability. And good news, it was always there. He's a good writer. He's a good musician. He is an artist. And much like David Bowie, he presented that the internal artist in him in a auditory and visual way. So a big part of criticizing himself wasn't just the music, man. It's all about the music. It was all about the show and the performance. Right. And making sure that audience members got the full experience.
I can appreciate that, because there is something to, like, I've always been a big proponent of, like, if you're going to go out and you're going to play,
David Bowie could have absolutely performed Moon Age Daydream without a big lightning bolt painted on his face. But the visual was part of the experience, man. Yeah. You know what I mean? So
it all really comes down, it's all very subjective.
And I want to be clear, I'm not dismissing Marilyn Manson, but I'm also not comparing him to the importance, to me personally, of David Bowie. You know what I mean? That'd be like comparing your father and a neighbor. It's not the same thing. But Marilyn Manson he's a valid artist, and now that you can look past the shock value and just listen to the music for music's sake, the music's really good. And Marilyn Manson's not going to shock you at this point. So I would suggest now go back and listen to Antichrist Superstar and those first few albums. His guitar.
All right, maybe I will do that. Because, see, for me, when you put like Trent Reznor and Marilyn Manson together,
which has happened,
to me, Trent Reznor comes out on top 9 times out of 10.
Reznor produced Marilyn Manson's album. They used to record together at his studio in New Orleans. Marilyn Manson played guitar on some Nine Inch Nails tracks. The two are very closely connected.
Interesting.
So if Reznor respects Manson, if you respect Reznor, by proxy, you kind of got to at least
respect
you got to at least, least of all yourself. But at the very least, you've got to give the benefit of the doubt to listen to Marilyn Manson.
All right. And I will do that. I will do that.
Dude, listen, and you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and say, like, don't go back and listen to the early hits yet. Listen to his newer stuff. It's really good.
Yeah.
He's got a couple of singles there's two that I have in mind. I don't know the name of one of them. I think it's Lazarus. But the other one is a song called Deep Six. And they're really, dude, they're good. they're heavy, they're dark, they're deep.
All right.
One of his guitarists, not the guitarist for the Spooky Kids, which was his original band, but one of his guitarists was John Five, who I don't know if you recall in a couple episodes
we
ago.
talked about that. I didn't know who he was.
Right, Ross brought him up as one of his favorite guitarists. He's really talented. He's played with Rob Zombie. He's great. Can I just
make a point here? I was thinking the other day, like, who is my favorite guitarist? And like, I'm not a lead guitarist guy. Like, I don't really care about the virtuoso guys. But if I was going to say my favorite rhythm guitarist in music,
James Hetfield.
No,
just because I realized last week I cannot go an hour and a half without mentioning Metallica. So there's your Metallica reference, folks.
No, I was going to say Scott Ian from Anthrax. It is my favorite guy.
Wow.
Like, that guy is a fucking animal, man. SOD.
That like, is so out of left field. He's awesome. Don't get me wrong. It just on a like desert island list, I would not have picked Scott Ian. That's
now the rhythm fucking.
Dude, he's so good. He's cool,
amazing. Man. The guy is fucking amazing. That guy can write riffs for days. And like, I mean, dude, Among the Living, you know, like all the SOD shit. Oh, he's fucking awesome. I love Scott Ian. That guy can write, man.
What was your sore subject? Maybe potentially sore subject. What was your thoughts on I'm the Man?
At the time, I really thought it was great. I really liked it. We're
talking about the EP, not the song.
Yeah.
The Man, right? Well, okay. What are your thoughts about the song I'm the Man?
I thought it was kind of hokey, but I still enjoyed it. You know. I know that they went into the
step up, sucker, understand, don't you know that I'm the man.
God. Yeah. Well, they were delving into the hip hop. Those guys were all hip hop guys,
you know
too.
How cool is that? That I mean, dude, what a precursor to what was gonna happen. As being a New York guy who was into the sort of not just music scene, but the fuck you music scene. That at that point in the 80s, that punk rock, hip hop, and heavy metal had become.
Yeah.
It was all very much just a thing. Socially, things were weird in the 80s. There was this disassociation between poor or lower middle class people from what was going on with the federal government. There was a disillusionment that was permeating the culture. And in New York, there was a reaction to that. And it actually probably started in the 70s, but by the 80s, you saw the birth of New York hardcore. You saw the birth of an underground hip hop scene that wasn't the Sugar Hill Gang or Africa Bambaataa.
Right.
That was the Beastie Boys and Run DMC.
Yeah.
You know, there was this rebel movement on the East Coast. And Scott Ian was a part of that.
Definitely.
And the Beastie Boys were a part of that too.
Definitely.
And the Beastie Boys started out as a punk band.
Yes.
But back then on the East Coast, it wasn't hip hop. It wasn't punk rock. It wasn't heavy metal. It was people who were sick of the bullshit that they were getting fed.
Yeah, and I just got to say.
And they all kind of gravitated to the same thing.
Right. You're right. You're absolutely right. It was a melting pot of
culture.
Of people who are just like, we want something different.
Yeah. Middle fingers in the air, like we don't care.
And dude, the Beastie Boys like had such a major impact on me musically.
And they had a major impact on hip hop.
Yeah.
Which is bizarre for a band that was comprised of three Jewish white guys who were punk rockers.
Right.
For them to, and you know, if you want to really attribute that to anybody, it's to the grandfather, the godfather, Rick Rubin, because that guy he was the bridge. He was the guy who literally had his feet in both worlds.
Yeah, he set it off. LL Cool J, Slayer,
Russell Simmons, dude, which is for I can't say most people, but a lot of people do know that Russell Simmons and DJ Run are brothers. And they were at the very least friends, but my broken, damaged memory is trying to tell me that Russell Simmons and Rick Rubin were actually roommates in college. I believe Russell Simmons was Rick Rubin's sort of path towards Run DMC. And and since he had this other foot in the punk rock metal CBGB's world of New York hardcore and underground, it sort of allowed him to blend the Beastie Boys and Run DMC into one world of new hip hop that also included Aerosmith, who he later recorded. He recorded Run DMC's album and brought Aerosmith on board. And later, when Aerosmith was making their sort of comeback in the 80s and 90s that got them larger than they ever were when they were originally out there, that was all Rick Rubin.
Right. And back in the 80s, Slayer, Kerry King from Slayer, played the guitar on No Sleep Till Brooklyn from the Beastie Boys because Rick Rubin produced Rain in Blood, right?
For Deaf American.
Yeah, exactly.
Because there was, at that point, there was two labels. There was Deaf American and Def Jam. Def Jam was the hip hop label. Deaf American was the more rock and roll style label. And they got everybody. They had Aerosmith was, I believe, Aerosmith was on Deaf American. I know Slayer was. I know Danzig was. And the Cult.
Oh, the Cult. The Cult. You brought up the Cult. Dude, I love the Cult.
And you know what? Guess who I saw them open for?
Who?
Metallica, because I can't go more than an hour and a half without bringing up Metallica.
That's my second. I remember that tour. What was that? Was that the Electric tour?
For them, yeah. For them. And Justice for... Right. Yeah, we actually, if you go back to, I believe, the first episode.
So when was that? What was it, like 88, 89?
Yeah, 90, something like that. And we talked at length about how I saw Metallica explode.
Yeah.
And go from a theater act to a stadium act within one tour because of the release of the one video. Do you remember that? Do you remember us talking about that?
I do, yeah.
Okay, so that, and they were on, I believe, what was that? And Justice for All, was that on Deaf American? No, but the Cult Electric,
I think they were on Elektra at that point.
But the Cult's album was, and the sort of the legend that I heard was that, or the rumor that I heard was, Ian Astbury and the rest of Billy Duffy and the guys from the Cult came into the studio the first day. They're all set to record, ready to go. Chief, let's do this, mate. And he threw down a stack of ACD records and said, go home and learn how to play those songs. Call me when you're ready. And they literally just sort of tucked their tails between their legs, took the albums and went home and learned to play Back in Black. And if you listen to Sonic Temple, that was the one with Firewoman on, right?
Yeah.
You listen to that album, it is a fucking straight AC/DC lift.
See, to me, Electric was always the better album.
Yeah,
I really liked that album.
Hate the hat.
Yeah, well,
the coonskin cap that he's wearing on the cover.
And I've heard such great things about Ian Astbury. Like my buddy.
Hey man, he was the singer for The Doors.
Did you know? I did.
All right,
yeah. And my roommate Frapp, who I was in a band with, who was in Circus of Power. Old school band.
Yes. They were a very underrated band. I remember when their first album came out. Me and a few friends of mine really gravitated to them and hoped that they would go interstellar. They never kind of did, but I would love to see a resurgence. So anybody listening to this, please check out Circus of Power. They're fucking rock and roll awesome.
We got to get Frapp on the show. I can get him on the show for sure. Frapp and I were roommates for forever, and I know him. We were in a band together.
And this is the dude from Circus of Power.
Yeah. He was a bass player.
Dude, I would love it. Yeah. I would love it, and it would probably.
I mean, he's got fucking gold records.
You know what I'm saying? It would probably freak him out a little bit to know that, like, yeah, man, I work with this guy, and he's actually a really big fan of yours from like way back in the day. He'd be like, dude, how old is this dude? Is he retarded?
Oh man, I could tell you.
Circus of Power is so great.
I could tell you fucking stories of living with Frapp. His name's Mark Frappier. He goes by Frapp, and he used to have really long fucking dreadlocks down to his ass.
Yeah, that was one of the things about Circus of Power, and their whole kind of vibe was like they were the dreadlock, tattooed, leather pants, boot wearing biker. Those mid-90s sort of like biker dudes that would
pre-90s.
Yes, yeah. Well, the band, but when they broke, there was broke to us, to me and my friends, because like I said, we found them kind of accidentally, and it was very niche. Like, we were into that fucking AC/DC
which is
style, old
special.
school, grindy rock and roll.
Right.
Just that.
Yeah.
It was very old school.
They were
They were, I mean, they were a biker band. They were a bar band, but with killer singles. And if you really get down to it, if you want to drill down, that's what AC/DC is too.
Right.
And I've heard stories about AC/DC before they broke in the States, back with Bon Scott, when they were a bar band. And everybody in St. Kilda, or everybody in Melbourne, or everybody in Brisbane would come out, and when AC/DC was coming into town, they all went to the show, and they would rock out. And as the drinks poured and the songs flowed, they all it was this understood thing. We're all fighting at some point tonight, so, brace yourself, son.
Can you imagine?
Eventually, the punches are coming.
Oh, man.
And it was an understood thing that you were going to catch one to the jaw if you went and saw AC/DC. And
I can't imagine anything more awesome than seeing a Bon Scott AC/DC show, man. I can't imagine.
Well,
I saw Metallica with Cliff Burton back in the day. I think it was 85, 86.
Actually, you've mentioned that a couple of times, and I had questions about that. Like, when did you saw them with Cliff?
Yeah, it was Master of Puppets, and it was with Ozzy.
So they were opening. They were the opening band for Ozzy. Much like
and I think
what didn't Guns N' Roses ended up opening for AC/DC or Ozzy? Or Motley Crue? Who did Guns N' Roses sort of outshine when they finally broke?
Oh, jeez, Guns N' Roses.
You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
Completely. The first big Guns N' Roses tour, who did they open for? But back then, when Metallica finally broke...
I know Metallica was opening for Guns N' Roses, I think. Or maybe it was the other way around. Maybe it was one of the two. And was that back when, like, Guns N' Roses, like, fucked... Like Axl was being a fucking cocksucker up in Canada somewhere in like the stadium.
I think that was in Pennsylvania.
Oh,
when he couldn't be bothered to show up for a show because he was watching a basketball game and they rioted and threw chairs.
Right, exactly.
I'm pretty sure that was in PA.
Okay.
But anyway, that's neither here nor there.
That isn't. I like to get off track.
You don't say. If you didn't, we wouldn't have a podcast. The thing I wanted to get to was, because I've actually had this question in my head before, because we discussed this before, but I never got the details. So now the details that I'm informed with are that Metallica was opening for Ozzy.
Yeah.
So that was before they broke big. It was on the Master of Puppets tour.
Well, they were big to me. They weren't like, when the
at that point, to be fair, at that point they would have been big to me too. I was listening to them at that point.
Right. Yeah.
But where'd you see them?
Oh, Jesus Christ. I think it was the Monsters of Rock. Something Monsters of Rock.
Monsters of Rock, to my recollection, was the collections of the big four, though, wasn't it?
Van Halen was there. Eddie Van Halen played, and there was somebody else that played. Fuck, I can't remember.
This one is definitely going to need some feedback, folks.
Yeah.
Let us know about Monsters of Rock.
And it was in Texas.
Go to AnvilHammerHatchet.com and click the phone site, and just because this shit's going to be too much to type. So just call the number, leave us a voicemail, and tell us what those early Monsters of Rock shows were. Because I know later on those became more of like what would become the big four tours.
Right.
Which was Slayer,
Anthrax,
Metallica, Anthrax, and Megadeth.
Yeah.
Right.
But I did see Metallica again during the first Black Album tour.
After they were monolithic.
Yeah, after they were huge. And
I've told this story on the podcast before, but I was blessed enough to see them in between. Because you saw them in stadium with Ozzy.
Yeah.
And the stadium wasn't there because of them. It was there because of Ozzy.
Right.
And you saw them in a stadium on the Black Album.
Because of them.
Right. I was fortunate enough to have the sweet spot where they were big enough to headline on their own, but not big enough to play an auditorium.
Right.
So I saw him in a theater.
No way.
Yeah. God, man, you got to go back and listen to our catalog. I swear we've talked about this on the podcast
I'm sure we
before.
have. I'm always worried about us repeating the same shit that we talked about.
Well, and we do. And I saw them at this club called the Center Stage, which was a theater.
So what year was this?
It had to be...
Must have been like 90, huh?
89, I want to say.
Okay.
Whatever. It was the year Injustice for All came out.
Yeah.
And it was in between the time that the one video got released.
Right.
But that's what... Remember your caveat for Don't Be CBA, that one was not the last song on the second side. It was the last song on the first side.
Yeah.
That was purely based on this story. Because when one got released on MTV, they exploded. And on the second leg of the tour, I, as an employee of Subway, got me. Are you starting to remember the story now?
I do remember,
yeah. So I did end up going singing them on the set. Go back and listen to previous episodes if you have no idea what I'm talking about. It's, in my humble opinion, a relatively funny story. But I saw them on both legs of the tour, and I saw them in a theater, and I saw them in an arena. And I saw them in an arena with The Cult opening for them. And they were playing all those songs that Rick Rubin had completely steered them into I actually heard the same thing about the first Danzig album.
Is that
as far as Rick Rubin goes, because he produced that as well. For people who don't know, Rick Rubin sort of took over rock and roll in the early 90s. And he was the go-to guy that, Logan and I last week, we really discussed how it's the responsibility of an audio engineer to bring out the best in your artist without putting yourself all over their work. You don't want to impose your personality on their sound. You want to get out of the way. Anyway, enough about Rick Rubin. I mean, we've been kind of going on about him ad nauseum, but he did definitely color the sound of rock and roll at that time period.
Absolutely.
With via Metallica and Danzig and the Cult.
And Johnny Cash.
And Johnny Cash, yeah, absolutely.
Do you remember that he did all those American recordings with Johnny Cash where Johnny Cash...
Do you remember the name of that final album? Or maybe it wasn't his final album, but the one that had Hurt and Personal Jesus and...
I don't know the name
Rusty
of the album.
Cage and...
Yeah,
he did a covers album. It might have been like American Standards or something like that. It was
American Volume something, whatever.
But an amazing album where he reinterpreted
like 9 Inch Nails,
right, and Depeche Mode and Soundgarden,
yeah,
and Rick Rubin, to not go again too much on about him, really sort of sculpted the way that the direction those tracks went into, much like the way he sculpted hip hop. He really was very influential in the direction that hip hop went into. If Run DMC and Aerosmith hadn't done Walk This Way, hip hop would have went into a completely different direction.
And the Beastie Boys discovered LL Cool J, who was also on Def Jam and who also had major hits and who also was like one of those up and coming.
Yeah. He was LL Cool J was a badass. And to be quite honest, I can't remember the name of the album that it's on, but I'm pretty sure Rick Rubin produced the album that Mama Said Knock You Out was on.
I think so.
But I really like that song a lot.
It's a great song.
Indeed, the opening, "Don't Call It a Comeback. I've been here for years." I love that opening line. It's so assertive and aggressive.
Right. Like Chuck D style almost.
Right. Yeah. Just fucking right up. I'm here. You're going to deal with me.
I really liked going back to Cali with the super heavy scratching. Going back to Cali.
And
Cali.
That was very much an old school sound. I've noticed in a lot of hip hop productions that are coming out now, you do see a lot of scratching samples, but they don't sound organic. I might be 100% wrong, but they sound like the samples that I've heard when I have used Reason.
I really love that. I love that old heavy like Run DMC, where it's just like there's something just fresh about it. And you get into like Detroit like hip hop.
That was me, by the way. I do not have a turntable.
Oh, that wasn't you? We're not set up. But no, the Detroit sound, like with Schoolie D and like, you know, a lot of those old Kid Rock even, you know, Kid Rock was from Detroit. Eminem, I think, wasn't he from Detroit?
Yeah, Eminem's definitely from the D for sure.
Yeah, and that guy,
that whole 8 Mile thing with like the movie and the sound. I really like Eminem.
I like Eminem too.
Like his sort of cartoonish horror story. To be fair, I like older Eminem more than new Eminem.
Absolutely.
When he was really embodying the personification of quote unquote Slim Shady.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sort of Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees thing that he was doing. Like, it was really unique.
You could not deny that shit was fucking legitimately fucking badass hip hop.
If you want to like just dial it back to what we were talking about before, he was like the Marilyn Manson of hip hop.
Indeed.
You know, bringing the horrorcore element to it. And at some point, speaking of horrorcore, I really want to at some point get into like Grave Diggers and Killer Bees, which was this sort of side project that Wu-Tang Clan had back in the day. Grave Diggers is amazing. It was sort of a horror element to what Wu-Tang had done, and it's really fun.
Do you remember who was it with Bushwick Bill?
Ghetto Boys.
Ghetto Boys.
Yeah, from the 9th Ward in Texas. Yeah. Ghetto Boys were. I mean, that shit was real. Send some condolences to Big Daddy Ross, the boss's boss. You know, he's our third guy. And Big Daddy Ross is a part of this, and we're worried about him. So, you know, send him some posts on Facebook. You know, send him some condolences on Instagram,
Give
on Twitter.
An emoji flower.
Send us some, you know, get well soon voicemails. If you want to do all that, the easiest way to find all that stuff is just to go to AnvilHammerHatchet.com. If you look at the top of the page, there are links to all of our social media sites. Which are Twitter. There's a link to our Twitter. Facebook. There's a link to our Instagram, our Facebook,
and YouTube.
The new YouTube channel where all of our episodes are up, as well as the original musical track by Army. It's Shark. It's a great song. There's even a link to our Google Voice number. So if you want to leave some voicemail and just give Ross a little, hey, get well soon. Hope you get to keep your dick, buddy. You know. Just click the link. It'll bring it right. If you go to it on your phone, it'll bring it right up. So, you know, check us out on social media. If you want us to talk about anything in particular, AnvilHammerHatchet@gmail.com or our phone number like I said, the links on the website. Just go to those things. Shoot it to us.
And we can talk about Play-Doh. We can talk about anything.
We can talk about pretty much anything.
So if you want to talk about...
And a good example of that is we can talk about Keith Moon, which our listener Andrew out there asked us to talk about, and I'd say we covered Keith Moon in a pretty good way.
Yeah, we hit it.
You know, so if there's anything you want to hear us talk about, just let us know. We'll cover it, man. We really will. We'll do it. So, you know, stay in touch, be active, be participatory.
Except politics. We don't do politics.
No politics, no religion.
Except
Satanism and Scientology. Yeah, those two, because Satanism is awesome and Scientology is fun, because who doesn't like aliens? Let's all make an agreement to pray to the ultimate overlord, Xenu. Tom Cruise is God. We'll see you fuckers next week.
Peace.